What happens when the gospel world's golden boy gets exposed? Jonathan McReynolds, the voice behind some of the most powerful and uplifting songs of our generation, is now caught in a storm that no one saw coming. Fans are shocked, critics are talking, and Jonathan himself has finally broken his silence. But what he revealed is not only surprising, it's leaving the entire gospel community questioning everything they thought they knew about him. Stay tuned, because this is one story you do not want to miss. Jonathan McReynolds is not just another gospel artist. He's been celebrated as a once-in-a-generation voice, a man whose lyrics cut deep into the soul and whose life seemed to reflect the faith he so passionately sang about. For years, his image has been polished, his reputation seemingly spotless, and his career path looked like a blueprint for success in the gospel industry. But now that carefully crafted picture has been shattered. In recent weeks, shocking claims have surfaced that put Jonathan at the center of controversy. Allegations, whispers, and online debates have fans asking, who is the real Jonathan McReynolds? And when the man himself decided to speak out, his words were nothing short of explosive. In this video, we're diving deep into the full story. The rise of Jonathan McReynolds, the details of the so-called exposure that has fans buzzing, and what his bold response means for the gospel music community as a whole. We'll unpack his journey, the controversies, and the aftermath in a way that reveals not just the headlines, but the deeper truths behind them. You won't believe some of the details we uncovered, and by the end, you'll see why this story is shaking the gospel world to its core. So make sure you watch until the very end, because the most shocking part is still to come. Before we can understand the weight of the controversy surrounding Jonathan McReynolds today, we first need to look at how he became one of the most admired figures in gospel music. Because this is not just the story of a man facing exposure. It's the story of how a carefully cultivated image can come crashing down. Jonathan McReynolds' journey began not in the spotlight, but in the quiet halls of church, where his gift for music first took shape. From an early age, it was clear he had something special, a natural ability to combine his faith with melodies that felt both deeply personal and universally relatable. Unlike many artists chasing fame, Jonathan seemed destined for something bigger, to change the way gospel music was experienced by a new generation. His breakthrough came with the release of his debut album Life Music in 2012. Songs like No Gray and Lovin' Me didn't just top charts, they spoke directly to the struggles and vulnerabilities of everyday believers. At a time when gospel music often leaned heavily on tradition, Jonathan's fresh, transparent approach made him stand out. He wasn't just preaching from a pulpit, he was confessing his own weaknesses, doubts, and humanity through song. That authenticity quickly became his brand. Fans admired him for being real, relatable, and unafraid to show imperfection. While many gospel artists tried to present a flawless image of faith, Jonathan admitted to his flaws openly. That kind of honesty was revolutionary, and it positioned him as both a spiritual leader and a cultural voice for younger audiences. By the mid-2010s, Jonathan's career was skyrocketing. His albums were earning critical acclaim, he was receiving nominations and awards, and collaborations with big names in gospel and mainstream music alike solidified his place as one of the most influential voices of his time. He graced stages around the world, performed at major gospel events, and even found himself earning respect from artists outside of gospel for his pure artistry. But it wasn't just the music. Jonathan's public persona was spotless. He was well-educated, articulate, and passionate about his faith. He held a master's degree in theology, taught as an adjunct professor, and often spoke about the intersection of faith and real life. In an industry often rocked by scandals, Jonathan appeared untouchable, a man who lived by the same principles he sang about. For years, fans viewed him as the perfect package, talented, grounded, faithful, and free of the kind of drama that often follows public figures. Churches invited him, parents encouraged their children to listen to him, and critics hailed him as a refreshing face for the future of gospel. And yet, here's where the tension begins. The higher you rise, the more people pay attention. And when someone builds a reputation on being flawless or above scandal, the pressure to maintain that image becomes unbearable. With Jonathan, that perfect picture began to show cracks. Cracks that would eventually lead to the shocking exposure. Jonathan McReynolds' music was about transparency and honesty. The reality is that nobody, no matter how famous or faithful, is immune to human flaws. And when those flaws come to light, the fall from grace can be even harder. But here's the part that makes this story even more intriguing. Jonathan's so-called exposure didn't just catch fans by surprise. It forced people to question whether his public image was ever as untouchable as it seemed. And his eventual response turned the conversation upside down. For years, Jonathan McReynolds was one of the few gospel artists who seemed immune to the gossip blogs and internet rumor mills. While others in the industry found themselves battling stories about money, affairs, or double lives, Jonathan's name was always spoken with respect. Fans believed that his life mirrored his lyrics, transparent, faithful, and grounded in truth. But in the age of social media, where every message, every photo, and every word can be taken out of context, no one is truly safe. And for Jonathan McReynolds, his moment of exposure came not with a single explosive revelation, but through a series of claims and stories that painted a very different picture than the one fans were used to. The firestorm began when private conversations allegedly tied to Jonathan surfaced online. Screenshots circulated across Twitter, Instagram, and gossip pages, hinting at behavior that clashed with the clean-cut image he had so carefully built. Some claimed that Jonathan had been involved in relationships that were far more complicated than his songs of faith and purity suggested. Others accused him of hypocrisy, preaching one standard while living another behind closed doors. Now, let's pause here. It's important to note that in today's world, not everything that circulates online is true. Rumors spread like wildfire, and gospel artists, in particular, often face unfair scrutiny because their lives are held to a higher standard. But regardless of what was real and what was exaggerated, the damage was done. Jonathan's name, once associated only with uplifting music, was suddenly trending for all the wrong reasons. Fans were shocked. Churches that once proudly invited him to perform began questioning his credibility. Comment sections were flooded with debates, some defending Jonathan passionately, arguing that everyone makes mistakes, while others felt betrayed, convinced that the man they had looked up to wasn't who he seemed. And this is where things got even more complicated. Because Jonathan McReynolds wasn't just accused of ordinary mistakes, he was accused of failing to live up to the very message he preached. His songs about honesty, about avoiding compromise, about striving to live a Christ-centered life were now being reread under a different light. Listeners began asking, was it all just an act? What made the scandal even more explosive was the timing. Jonathan had been at a career high. Multiple award nominations, sold-out concerts, and a growing platform not just in music, but also in ministry. He was speaking at conferences, publishing books, and being held up as a role model for the younger generation. To see him suddenly associated with words like exposed, hypocrite, and scandal was a shock to his audience. And as with most public figures, the internet did not hold back. Memes were made, think pieces were written, and some even began digging through old interviews, looking for clues that Jonathan might not have been living the life he claimed. It wasn't just about one incident anymore. It became a trial of his entire character. But here's the most shocking part. Jonathan didn't respond immediately. For days, while the controversy swirled and speculation grew, he remained silent. That silence only fueled the fire. Some interpreted it as guilt, others as wisdom, believing he was choosing not to give attention to lies. Either way, one thing was certain: Jonathan McReynolds' name would never again be seen in the same untouchable light it once had. The scandal cracked the perfect image he had built for years, and whether fans believed the rumors or not, the seed of doubt had been planted. And this leads us to the most dramatic part of the story: Jonathan finally speaking out. Because when he did break his silence, he didn't just deny or confirm the allegations. He took a very different approach, one that shocked his critics, comforted his fans, and left many people questioning what really happened behind the scenes. After days of silence that left fans and critics alike speculating, Jonathan McReynolds finally addressed the controversy in a statement that immediately went viral. Unlike what many expected, a simple denial or a vague apology, Jonathan's response was thoughtful, raw, and shared on his social media platforms. He began by acknowledging the storm that had erupted around him. He admitted that the exposure had been painful, confusing, and humbling, and that it had forced him to confront aspects of his life he had never publicly discussed. Jonathan emphasized that while some of the claims circulating online were exaggerated or taken out of context, he would not shy away from addressing the truth head-on. He spoke about the pressure of living up to the image of a perfect Christian artist. For years, he had felt an unspoken expectation to embody holiness in a way that left no room for human imperfection. Jonathan shared that this pressure often led to private struggles, moments of doubt, mistakes he had made, and times when he fell short of the ideals he sang about. What truly captured the public's attention was how he framed his response, with vulnerability and accountability. Jonathan did not attempt to shift blame or dismiss the claims entirely. Instead, he acknowledged that while his intentions had always been sincere, he was human and had made choices that required reflection and growth. This honesty, rare in the age of social media, resonated with many fans who were eager to see someone admit fault without collapsing under public scrutiny. Jonathan also addressed the spiritual implications of the exposure. He explained that it had been a wake-up call, prompting him to reevaluate not only his personal life, but also how he used his platform. He reflected on the responsibility of being a public figure in the gospel industry and how his actions, intentional or not, affected those who looked up to him. "I realize that transparency and accountability are not just optional, they are necessary," he wrote. "This experience has humbled me, and I am committed to growing, learning, and being better for those who trust and support me." The response was met with mixed reactions. Fans praised his courage, calling him a real example of faith in action, and applauding his willingness to speak openly about imperfection. Social media buzzed with messages of support, with many expressing relief that Jonathan was addressing the matter honestly instead of hiding or deflecting. However, critics were less forgiving. Some argued that admitting to mistakes still did not absolve him of responsibility, and they questioned whether his public acknowledgement was enough to restore his credibility. The divide between supporters and skeptics highlighted a broader conversation about accountability, public persona, and the high standards placed on faith leaders in the public eye. Despite the controversy, Jonathan's response achieved something significant. It shifted the narrative from mere gossip to a deeper discussion about human imperfection, resilience, and the complexities of living a life in the spotlight. For the first time, fans saw not just the artist but the man, someone grappling with the realities of fame, expectation, and faith. But here's the part most people didn't anticipate. Jonathan's response wasn't just about defending himself. He used the moment as a teaching opportunity. In follow-up posts, interviews, and live sessions, he shared lessons he had learned about grace, forgiveness, and the importance of transparency in personal and professional life. He encouraged his followers to approach judgment with caution and to remember that even spiritual leaders are human. In doing so, Jonathan transformed a potential career-ending scandal into a moment of growth, both for himself and for his audience. Yet, while his response calmed many fears, it didn't erase the shock or the questions that remained. What had been exposed? How much of it was true? And how would this chapter shape Jonathan McReynolds' future in gospel music and ministry? Once Jonathan McReynolds broke his silence, the conversation shifted from speculation to analysis. Fans, critics, and industry insiders began dissecting the situation, and it became clear that this exposure was more than just a fleeting headline. It was a pivotal moment that could reshape his career and the way gospel artists are viewed in the public eye. The immediate fallout was visible across social media platforms. Some longtime fans expressed feelings of betrayal, saying they had admired Jonathan as a role model and felt blindsided by the allegations. Twitter threads and Instagram comment sections exploded with debates as supporters defended his transparency while skeptics questioned his judgment and past choices. The polarized reactions highlighted one of the core challenges faced by public figures, maintaining credibility while navigating weighed in as well. Gospel music insiders noted that Jonathan's transparency, while controversial, also had the potential to strengthen his long-term credibility. Unlike artists who deny or hide mistakes, Jonathan's willingness to confront his exposure directly demonstrated authenticity, a quality increasingly valued by fans in the digital age. Some commentators argue that this could actually expand his influence, particularly among younger audiences who crave honesty and relatability in spiritual leaders. However, the exposure did have tangible consequences. Some planned collaborations and speaking engagements were put on hold as organizers reevaluated their associations. Endorsement opportunities were scrutinized, and media outlets debated whether to continue covering him in the same positive light. In essence, Jonathan was facing both a reputational and professional crossroads. He could either allow the controversy to define him, or he could use it as a platform for growth and accountability. Beyond career implications, there were also deeper, more personal lessons for Jonathan. In interviews following the scandal, he reflected on the pressures of public life and the danger of building an image that is too perfect. He admitted that striving to appear flawless had, in some ways, isolated him from those closest to him, and prevented him from seeking help or guidance when he needed it most.